On a sweltering day in July, about 20 years ago, my husband and I walked past a construction site. We heard noises coming out of a cardboard box. So we ripped the box open, and inside there were 3 tiny kittens. They were almost dead from the heat, and insects were running all over them. But with some food, water, and care back at our house, they revived pretty quickly. They were adorable, and we named them Snap, Crackle, and Pop. The next day, I took them into an organization that I knew very little about, the Richmond SPCA, and I sought to turn them in. The lady behind the desk said that they would be accepted, but that I should be aware that they would be immediately euthanized. Euthanized. It was my life's moment of epiphany. These tiny, sweet, playful creatures that my husband and I had worked so hard to save would be summarily killed. I didn't understand why this would be true, but I knew I couldn't let it happen, so I took them back. I found homes with friends for 2 of the 3, and the third became our beloved Snap. We adored her for the 16 wonderful years that we had with her. When we tell people that an animal can change your life, I'm speaking from experience, because Snap completely changed mine. She made me realize that the fate that I had saved her from was happening to animals all over this country. And I felt a deep commitment in my heart that I needed to do everything in my power to keep that from happening to as many of them as I possibly could. So I sought successfully to join the board of directors of the Richmond SPCA. And about 3 years later, I left the law firm in which I was a partner and became the CEO of the Richmond SPCA. So now, a number of years later, I certainly understand in a lot more detail why it is that animals die in animal shelters all over this country, but I still find it shocking and offensive because it isn't necessary. In the U.S., about 7 million animals enter animal shelters every year, and about 3.5 million of them are killed. That is a shocking number. I use the word killed because the word euthanasia actually means a mercy killing. It means taking the life of a person or an animal because they are suffering from an untreatable and painful condition or illness. We use the word euthanasia to refer to killings of animals in animal shelters because it makes us feel better. It keeps us from having to acknowledge the truth that only a tiny fraction of those deaths are actually true euthanasias. The vast majority of them are killings of healthy or treatably sick and injured homeless animals. Should we find it acceptable that we are killing millions of sweet, lovable animals every year in our animal shelters? Would we find it acceptable if we knew that there were cages available for them, that the lives are being taken largely to save time, a little bit of time, and a little bit of money? Would any of us want our money to be spent that way? Well, it is being spent that way in shelters all over this country. Our tax dollars are supporting the killing of millions of homeless animals. And our tax dollars simply don't need to be spent like that. I'm not just saying that. It has been demonstrated in more than 200 communities in this country that it is in fact possible to save all of the healthy and treatable homeless animals in a community. And they do it without warehousing or hoarding or in any way depriving these animals of a nurturing, stimulating environment. In fact, the state we're in right now, New Hampshire, is one of the places that has demonstrated to this country that it is possible to save all of your healthy and treatable homeless animals. And let's take my community, Richmond, Virginia. The Richmond SPCA is a private, no-kill humane organization. We take animals out of municipal, county, and city shelters all over our state. We save the lives of about 3,700 homeless animals each year. In 2013, our euthanasia rate at the Richmond SPCA was 0.4%. And I use that word euthanasia there correctly. Citywide in Richmond, including our municipal animal shelter, we have a save rate of 89%. That means that in 2013, only 11% of the animals entering any shelter in Richmond lost their lives, and not one of those was healthy. At the Richmond SPCA, we take the life of an animal only when that animal is either suffering from an untreatable illness or condition, or is too aggressive to be safely adopted out. So those are true mercy killings, and that is acceptable under a no-kill philosophy. So, why aren't more communities embracing or at least working toward a no-kill way of operating? Let's take Henrico County, which is a county that neighbors Richmond. It is very affluent. In 2013, 40% of the homeless animals coming into their shelter lost their lives. And when you go into the Henrico County shelter on a typical day, you see a lot of empty cages. That's not unusual. It's true in many municipal shelters all over this country. And it leads to this sad result, that the greatest risk to an animal's life in the United States is actually entering a shelter. Sad to say, isn't it? I mean, shelter ought to be a word that means a place that you go for protection. But actually, the best thing that we can do to reduce deaths in animal shelters is to keep animals in the homes that they've got and keep them from ever entering a shelter in the first place. The second best thing that we can do is to actually return lost pets to their guardians, and that's pretty easily accomplished through microchipping and tagging. The third best thing we can do is increase the proportion of animal acquisitions that come from animal shelters. And it may surprise you how feasible that third alternative is if you just look at the numbers. As we've said, 3.5 million animals die each year in animal shelters in the US. But 30 million people acquire a new pet each year. And currently, only about 30% of them will acquire that pet from an animal shelter. So you can pretty easily see that if we can just increase the market share of animal acquisitions going to shelters by about 3%, we can become a no-kill nation. So, how is it that a community can make this happen? Well, it's pretty clear. What are the pieces that you need to do? First of all, targeted high-volume spay-neuter programs are essential in order to radically reduce the birth rate, and it is important to make those programs available to the low-income portions of the community. That is what New Hampshire did in the 1990s, and it has been the key to the state's success. You need to provide pet retention support services so that people have help working through the problems that they may be having with their pet, like behavioral problems, for example, without relinquishing the pet at an animal shelter. We need to provide low-cost veterinary medical access. We need to be sure that pets of low-income families have somewhere to go, that they can get good quality veterinary medical care at a low cost so that they're not relinquished at a shelter for that reason. We have provided just such a clinic at the Richmond SPCA, and it has had a huge effect on lowering the number of sick and injured animals relinquished at shelters in our community. We need to provide trap, neuter, return programs for feral cats. We need to make sure that they are trapped, neutered, rabies vaccinated, and returned to the place in the community where they've been living instead of taken into shelters only to be killed, or worse, the problem ignored. We need to be sure that shelters have large foster care programs that rely on the help of community volunteers. This is especially crucial for the enormous number of neonatal kittens that come into almost all shelters. They need to be able to go into a home where they are cared for until they are old enough to be spayed and neutered, rabies vaccinated, and adopted to a permanent home. We need to trust in our communities. We need to market shelter adoptions in imaginative ways. We need to adopt pets without discrimination. And we need to do everything we can to harness the help that people in our communities will give us. It is important that every single one of us take care of our pet lovingly through his or her old age. And when it becomes time to acquire a new pet, that we do so only from an animal shelter, never from a breeder or a pet store. No matter what pet stores may say, the truth is that they get almost all of the animals that they sell from horrific puppy mills. We need to insist that municipal shelters have large and welcoming volunteer programs. It is so important that they have volunteers, but they often don't, claiming that it's a liability issue, when in reality, typically, it's because they fear the transparency that will come from having a lot of volunteers around. And we need to be sure that municipal shelters not only accept, but actually recruit partnership arrangements with private organizations like mine and rescue groups that will take animals out of their shelters and care for them and find them a great new permanent adoptive home. So, I hear all the objections with great frequency. The first one that you usually hear is that this is too costly, that it is less expensive to take their lives than it is to save them. But you know, this is said with absolutely no empirical support to back it up. In fact, there are communities in this country like Albemarle County, Virginia, and Reno, Nevada, that have as challenging financial problems as any communities in this country, and yet they are saving the lives of all of their healthy and treatable homeless animals. How? Through imaginative adoption programs and through finding solutions instead of relying on old ways. In fact, nationally, we've made huge progress in the last couple of decades. In the 70s and 80s, between 18 and 20 million homeless animals came into shelters nationwide each year, and almost all of them were killed. So we have made a lot of progress, and it's been based on those communities around this country that have been doing the right things and have been achieving a lot of success. But the situation we currently have is certainly nothing that any of us should be satisfied with. The other objection that I hear frequently is that if we don't make it easy for relinquishers to bring animals into shelters without any sort of impediment or any kind of questions asked, then alternatively those people will go and abandon those animals on the street, or they'll kill them in some dreadful way, or they will abuse them. But again, this is said without any data to back it up at all. In fact, I know from my own behavior when we found those kittens all those years ago, and I know from my experience in our community since then, that there are so many people in our community that are willing to help us save animal lives. We just need to ask them to do so and explain to them how to go about it. In fact, when people come to us at the Richmond SPCA, originally seeking to relinquish a pet, and we ask them to make use of the programs that we provide to help work through the problems that they may be having with their pet, whether they be behavioral or medical, we have discovered that 60% of the people who originally sought to relinquish a pet to us end up keeping that pet once they have made use of our resources. In fact, in Richmond, when we at the Richmond SPCA stopped simply silently accepting every pet brought to us, but began to ask our community to act responsibly by making appointments and utilizing the programs and services we were offering to them, the number of animals entering shelters in all of the city, including our municipal shelter, went down the next year, not up. And there were no increased stray animals picked up on the street, nor were there any increased reports of abuse or neglect. So, you've been hearing a lot about what I think. What does most of the public think? Well, it's interesting because the Associated Press did a poll in 2011, and it showed something quite interesting. 71% of people in this country believe that animal shelters should not be allowed to take the life of an animal unless that animal is too sick to be treated or is too aggressive to be adopted. The vast majority of people believe in the no-kill philosophy. In fact, this poll shows us that most people think that an animal shelter shouldn't be even allowed to take the life of an animal that is either healthy or treatably sick or injured. So, why is it that so many people in their hearts believe in the no-kill philosophy? Well, I'll tell you why I think it is. It's because animals are central to our lives. We feel such a deep connection with them. Randy Pierce is going to talk to you a little later today, and he can tell you about the deep bond that he has with his dogs. Almost every one of us has had a pet that has meant all the world to us. We share our homes with our pets. We share our beds with our pets. We share our lives with our pets. We share our food with them. From living with them so closely and loving them so much, from counting on them to give us comfort and support in moments of sadness or loss, we know that animals experience life pretty much the same way we do. They experience joy and love. They experience sadness and fear. They want to live just like we do. They want to enjoy life just like we do. Most people in this country love animals, and we want to see them protected, not killed. It is important that we make our voices heard to ensure that our society's behavior is consistent with our ethics. Truer words than these were really never spoken. It's important that you take sides. And I hope that you will stand with me on the side of the animals, because they need you. I hope that you will stand with me for them. You know, 20 years ago when I saved with my husband Snap and those kittens, they made me understand that I needed to speak up for them with courage and conviction. So I hope that all of the rest of you will add your strong voices to the others in this country who are asking that this become a no-kill nation. Thank you.